In an industry that's full of followers, Ghost decided to pull inspiration from much different places and lead a new path to success. That introductory statement probably didn't sound familiar to almost anyone, well, except for the co founder and CEO of Ghost, but more on that soon. First, it would be prudent if I initially laid out the inspiration for this content, and I'll be quick because unless you're an industry professional that has been either living without a phone or internet these past few days, you've at least headline read the Keurig Dr Pepper and Ghost deal announcement. Some of you maybe even took it a few steps further and gave your attention to so-called experts that rushed to provide boring and or terrible takes that were fabricated by regurgitating press release details and layering on a few ghost brand strategy basics they learned about from ChatGPT, or worse yet, after discovering this cool new energy drink sometime within the last year. Well, let me assure you, this content will be the complete opposite. But that being said, I do need to at least cover a few foundational elements from that KDP and Ghost deal announcement. Under the terms of the agreement, KDP will make an initial cash investment of approximately $990 million in exchange for 60% ownership stake in Ghost. This initial stage of the transaction is expected to close in the next several months. Additionally, starting in mid-2025, KDP expects to invest up to $250 million to buy out existing distribution agreements ahead of beginning to sell and distribute Ghost Energy through the KDP DSD network. And then in 2028, KDP will purchase the outstanding 40% stake in Ghost at a pre-negotiated valuation scale that will reflect its 2027 financial performance. So for my napkin math people, this initial stage of the transaction valued Ghost Lifestyle, which is mostly made up of the supplements, and Ghost Beverages, mostly energy drinks, collectively at $1.65 billion. EBITDA multiples were not made public at this time, but the valuation is said to represent net of anticipated cash tax benefits and approximately 3x net revenue multiple on a projected 2024 basis. And then finally, Ghost will operate as part of KDP's US Refreshment Beverages segment, though it will continue to be led by its co-founders, Dan Lourenco and Ryan Hughes. But I'll explain why that important detail has short and long-term ramifications a bit later in this content. On that note, though, let's circle back and clear up that introductory statement, because this would be kind of normally the portion of my content where I'd start examining tons of messy, dense, strategic subject matter nuance, in an attempt to kind of validate that I'm not just one of those so-called experts addicted to vanity metric dopamine hits, rushing to provide boring and or terrible takes on every newsworthy CPG industry event. But I'm not going to provide those typical insights here, and that's because everything you'd need to know has already been extremely well documented in my content over these last 8 years. In fact, that introductory statement is a direct quote from my July 2016 article where I proclaimed that Ghost Lifestyle, after launching just a few weeks prior, was the number one position brand to win in the sports nutrition market. But if that wasn't enough, I have all of the receipts that validate my super early non-consensus conviction, whether that be on the Ghost supplement side or the energy drinks. And honestly, even with stating that, it would be like visualizing the tip of the iceberg saying, because there's countless other private stuff that will never see the light of day. Yet, this is where I'm supposed to humble myself and say, even a blind squirrel can find a nut, or even broken clocks tell the time right twice a day. But to be completely fucking honest with you, I'm a bit overdoing that. You've seen me correctly predict countless major industry events, sometimes years before they happen. Fuck. Just think about the one super relevant KDP prediction content I did 3 years ago. It has become a bit of a cult classic within the beverage space because it correctly predicted the Nutrabolt C4 energy deal, the La Colombe deal, and the athletic brewing investment. But beyond that, I've provided early underlying support for my conviction around non consensus market moving trends, and I've proclaimed this or that brand is next with insane accuracy. I'd put my track record up against anyone. And why I can do this is because my brain is hardwired to see consumer behavior shifts early, model out those drivers of demand, understand what variables are moving categorical consumer markets, and matching up those patterns and sequences. I've devoted my entire adult life, so 15 years plus, to obsessing over every aspect of the emerging and intersecting CPG categories of functional foods, functional beverages, and nutritional supplements. And I'm sorry to go off on a tangent there, but my frustration is mostly stemming from that I really fucking can't stand that people are wasting their time or attention on these so called experts that write in templates, have ghostwriters, or distract you with flashy, fake it until you make it rhetoric. So, yes, I'm hating the game, the players knowingly playing it, and the audience buying into all of that bullshit. But enough about me. Let's kind of get this content back on track with what's on my mind from a short and long term perspective about the KDP and GHOST deal announcement. And maybe it's best to set the tone with something I stated in an August 2022 content piece. So, who's next? GHOST? That's an interesting one because obviously it would be super attractive from a growth trajectory point of view, but there's a joint venture in place with the venture fund associated with AB InBev. Beyond that, though, I just don't think it's the right timing for Ghost Energy to change hands, and ultimately, I don't believe it's a cultural fit for KDP. So while I've always believed that AB InBev would see Ghost as the cornerstone asset of its non-alcoholic beyond beer transformation, it didn't play out like that for a number of reasons, arguably coming from both sides. And I decided to even mention Ghost in that previous KDP energy drink portfolio content because, quite honestly, it's the only of the big three non-alcoholic beverage portfolios that had portfolio flexibility, as Coca-Cola is locked up with Monster Energy in perpetuity and Pepsi is locked up with Celsius with an extended exclusivity period. So even though that content was made a few months prior to the Nutrabolt and C4 deal, I assumed KDP would ensure it had portfolio flexibility because it would become a competitive advantage within the fast evolving energy drinks market. And before I tackle that Ghost cultural fit comment made previously, let's talk about the KDP energy drink portfolio architecture that now includes C4 Energy. You might be thinking, aren't these two brands competitive and thus would cannibalize each other? Well, KDP's chief strategist, Justin Whitmore, seems to rightfully understand the high-level brand distinction, which is that consumers have bucketed C4 Energy into performance and Ghost into cool lifestyle. And that's great, but when we're talking about beverages, not supplements, this is a war still fought on the ground. And what I mean by that is that it revolves around actions like field sales and marketing, distribution, and customer and channel management. This is where dreams become reality and nightmares are hiding around every corner. It will come down to effective and clear communication from KDP Corporate and its field teams and effective and clear communication from these brands, so C4 and Ghost, to not only KDP Corporate, but KDP Field and their own field teams. Honestly, this is what would keep me up at night if I were either Doss Cunningham or Dan Lourenco. Beyond that, having the right incentive structure with KDP will be key, and Ghost should have the upper hand here. This is because while C4 Energy is currently a tad larger in terms of retail sales, and KDP is more familiar with that company, KDP has more ownership in Ghost, and honestly, negotiating after C4 Energy has its own game theory advantages. But I also want to tease this portfolio architecture and brand distinctiveness out even further. While beverage CPG is lost or won on the ground, it doesn't mean air attacks aren't important, especially long term. And if you couldn't guess it, these air attacks are the kind of more high level brand building aspects that revolve around where brand discovery and consideration mostly happens, which today is coming from consumer intersections outside of the retail store. And I mentioned earlier that the Ghost co founders are staying on to lead the brand, which is key to ensuring Ghost can stand out amongst its peers, but more importantly, can continue culturally transcending above those CPG categorical spaces like supplements or energy drinks. But then maybe this gets us back to my earlier KDP cultural fit comment from 2022. In the press release, co founder and CEO of Ghost, Dan Lourenco, said that together we will continue to scale and build Ghost towards our vision of a 100-year brand. And I wholeheartedly believe that's not some business jargon bullshit because Ghost has been built with an extremely intentional, powerful, and strong foundation that they always internally refer to as a brick by brick mentality. Moreover, the press release quotes go on to talk about a similar challenger mindset and shared vision. And I do think that a lot has changed culturally the last 2 years, a bit in different directions for both KDP and Ghost that has brought them closer together. Though, even with that being true, KDP will never have the same vibe as even the more professionalized Ghost today. Additionally, since this was a majority acquisition in that first portion, and KDP already said it would operate within the US refreshment beverages segment, it begs the question, what happens when Dan Lourenco and or Ryan Hughes decide that the passion or love for Ghost just isn't there anymore? Because rarely does a founding team stay on and are passionately engaged long term, whether because all that corporate data driven decisions suck the fun out of the game or that people simply evolve and want to pave a new, different path. Regardless, this is where I'd be super concerned long term about KDP portfolio architecture, them retaining brand distinctiveness, and ultimately the Ghost brand authenticity. But maybe all that won't be tasked to KDP, at least directly, anyways. Even though I don't believe there was this clause originally in the deal, I'd imagine that KDP would love to get the majority ownership of Nutrabolt or C4, that now also owns a sizable portion of the hypergrowth brand Bloom, which KDP just announced that they will be distributing their energy drinks as well. KDP has the means and the network of backers to make any deal happen, but why I think that it could be important is that you could see a scenario in the next handful of years where Nutrabolt and Ghost are combined in a manner that resembles what Post Holdings did when they spun off their active nutrition brands into a standalone public company now called BellRing Brands. And I can kind of probably tease this logic behind this setup out even more throughout this content, but maybe I'll save that for a conversation over a nice steak dinner with KDP Chief Strategist Justin Whitmore. But on a more serious note, just to kind of end this off, I do want to congratulate again my good friends, Dan Lourenco and Ryan Hughes. I have seen every single step of this build, and it's amazing how much you guys have been able to achieve. But as Dan mentioned in a text message from that morning that I sent him, the work's not done. So we'll kind of see what happens from here. But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than 3/4 of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.